Hey there, welcome to the TBH podcast, monthly digest from me, Toby B. Hemingway from the Substack, tbhemingway.substack.com. If you just listen here, you can check it out there too. There's drawings, sometimes they're better than others. And it's the end of that short month, the month where you get ripped off on your rent or your mortgage. That often occurs to me. It did more so when I had shops and I struggled to pay the rent every month and be like, oh, it's 2 or 3 less days I can sell stuff to make that rent. Anyway, we made it. Well, I made it. I hope you made it. The month started with a bang in LA in terms of sporting news, and that was with the basketball of Luka Dončić coming from Dallas Mavericks to Los Angeles Lakers, the team that I support, the team that everyone in this house supports, whether they like it or not. They like it mostly. I mean, my daughter doesn't really care, but she's curious, and she likes to say, LeBron James, because that became a meme at some point. I don't know if you know that. Look it up. There's a kid saying, LeBron James. So now kids say that, which is funny. When a kid says it. Anyway, that my son is deep into his rec league basketball season, and he is now in the sort of upper end of the age group. Next year he'll go into the next age group. So whenever you're in the upper end of the age group, you can dominate a bit more. You're a bit bigger. You've been playing longer, and He's had a pretty dominant season. He's enjoying himself. And I was thinking a lot about, sports and kids and what sports can do for kids and how they behave when they're playing sports and how different kids cope with different situations. And I've coached his teams a couple of times, and it's fascinating. Kids are hilarious. And you really do, you see so much of a kid's personality when you get engaged in sports with them. And really what occurs to me often is that when I watch adults, like professionals playing sport, they just so often seem like big kids, and they kind of behave in a very similar way. It's very emotional, So I was thinking a lot about that already because my son was having a good season and really enjoying himself, and people at the league are all talking about him and talking to him. So it got me thinking about when Luka came, because Luka can play like a little boy with his temperament particularly. And he kind of looks like a little boy. His body looks remarkably sort of undefined and doughy for a fully grown professional athlete who is probably one of the top 5 at the game in the world. But he still kind of looks like a kid who mum gives dessert every night. Which is crazy, but everyone's different. And boy, can he play basketball. And anyway, that's what I wrote about to start off the month. A story called Who's a Big Boy? Just sort of hoping that with this big move, this surprise move to Los Angeles, that Luka can grow up a little bit and behave a little better on the court and give an example to people like kids like my son who will be watching him a lot for the coming years, I'm sure. He loves watching the basketball. And then, man, it was raining a lot in LA, so I was thinking about just how we had gotten pummeled with fire and then rain, unfortunately in the wrong order. It would have been nice to get the rain. It might have helped stifle the fire, but that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where the weather's all over the place. People are leaving LA, they can't take it anymore. Whenever I feel that way, I try to remind myself about LA in the 70s and 80s, the smog heyday of LA, and how lucky we are to live in an LA that actually has relatively clean air most of the time. Because that was not the case. If you can even just Google images of LA in the 80s, and the air is insane. I remember coming here in 85, I think when I was a kid. It definitely had a whole different colour and atmosphere. So anyway, that led me to keep thinking about the James Taylor song, Fire and Rain, which is just one of those songs that seemingly is everywhere. And I'd never really given it much thought. The first story, the one about Luka and my son, that was quite a long piece, but then I've done a bunch of short ones this month. So there was the Fire and Rain, was a quick one, and then prayer for a new fridge. We're getting I was looking for a new fridge online, and those photos of beautiful, beautiful fridges got me thinking about how different fridges that have been professionally stacked for a photo shoot are to most people's fridges, which are just chaos. And the particular form of chaos I think that gets me most is leftovers. I'm not a leftover person. I feel like there's two types of people in the world. You either love leftovers or you're not interested. I am not interested in 99% of leftovers. Now, maybe there's a nice cake or something and it doesn't get finished and then you can keep enjoying it. Okay, I don't consider that a leftover. Leftovers for me are like the leftovers of a meal that then gets put in a Tupperware or something, or maybe it's a pizza that didn't get finished and the whole box just gets shoved into the refrigerator. And then do you really, I'm not one of these pizzas better the next day, guys. I'm just not that person. It's just, no. So leftovers, fridges just become these leftover graveyards. And also that gets me thinking about, just what people did when they didn't have fridges. Like, we just throw things in the fridge. Anyway, wrote about the fridge, and got some good tips from people. People wrote back to me on that one, which was nice. And then lastly, I just wrote this week about the guys working on our garage, getting some work done. Hence the fridge thing came up because we're working on some stuff. And just remembering those days of doing those kinds of labouring jobs where you just worked on the thing in front of you. You took a lunch break. You did nothing. And I wrote specifically about, one job I had before I moved here in a warehouse where the guy I worked with would have us, he and I working like crazy. It was just me and him so that he could be done by lunch. He would just sit around all afternoon. It was fascinating. And how I just hung around waiting to clock out, because we literally clocked out. We had one of those old-timey punch clocks attached to the wall, and there was a card with my name on it, and you would slide it in, and it would punch what time you came and what time you left. If you didn't do that, you didn't get paid. And I didn't realise that you're supposed to punch in and out for your lunch break at one of the jobs I had like that. I got a talking to about that because I went to get lunch and didn't punch out. I thought that was a bit rough. Anyway, it got me thinking about really just pre-phone, pre-digital life where you couldn't be tuned in all the time and we didn't suffer as much micro boredom, as it's called, where if you're not being stimulated at every moment, you start to freak out or reach for your phone. Or I see people driving and they're constantly looking down at their phone all the time. And this thing where you hold your phone in front of you instead of to your ear when you're driving while you talk, how people think that makes it safer or more acceptable, I have no idea. Just buy a phone rack. I mean, they're like $3 at a discount store, and you shove it in I bought one when I was in Mexico, so I would have a phone rack while we were driving around. You just shove it in the air conditioning vent and you put your phone in it, and everyone's much safer, and I won't honk at you at the lights. Anyway, how did I get there? Oh yeah, just trying to get away from all that. Just three men on break, sitting at a table that they've made out of buckets and drywall, playing cards. My God, can we go there for a while? So that's what's happening. March is coming up. I don't know how much I'll do on here in March, to be honest. I've got I've got to take a minute, maybe, and do some other writing. Anyway, we'll see how it feels. But if you don't hear from me for a while, I'll be back. Some other things I want to write. But enjoy the stories, and you'll hear from me again soon. Thank you for listening. Who's a Big Boy? From February 6th, 2025. Last weekend, as the NBA rolled into its last set of games before the yearly trade period closes, my son prepared for his second game of a wildfire-interrupted recreational league basketball season. It was team photo day, so on Saturday morning, earlier than usual, we hurriedly made our way to a city gym a few neighbourhoods over. On the eve of his 11th birthday, already taller than his babysitter and closing in on his mother and me, I tried unsuccessfully to straighten my son's bedhead hair as he rushed to join his teammates before the camera. His first game had been a great success, standing inches above everyone else in uniform, armed with an ability to run the court with something close to a much shorter player's speed, perhaps the only of his many skills that I may reasonably claim he inherited from me. He was able to play freely at both ends. At one point, losing his defender at the top of the key with a between-the-legs dribble, he sank a three-point shot and ran back on defence, keeping his arch shooting hand high in celebration, for a little longer than I was comfortable with. We would talk about that later. He was largely controlling the game and he was enjoying himself. With the help of his team, he made winning look easy. The referees noticed, the coaches noticed, the other parents noticed. In the span of one off-season and one game, he'd gone from a reliable player, working hard, to a standout player in his division. In short, he was suddenly that guy. The second game wasn't a whole lot different, a comfortable win, with my son gobbling up the majority of points, while still battling away to defend and give his teammates their own scoring chances when they're unable to generate them alone. He may be in a that guy phase, but he is a kind player too, which isn't a given, it would seem, in a land where college scholarships promise life-changing rewards and a winning mentality can justify almost anything. He actually cares about his teammates and lifts them up when they need it. He hustles, plays fair, and rarely fouls. He smiles and jokes with the refs. In those ways, more than with buckets, he makes his mother and me proud. He's still growing, but we hope that never changes. That evening, a friend who follows the NBA more closely than I texted, looking for a reaction to news that my team, and my son's team, the Los Angeles Lakers, had landed one of the game's most talented young stars, Luka Dončić. This was big news, not that I was celebrating. It's easy to imagine Dončić being that guy as a boy too. I assume it's a given for almost any professional player to have dominated young teams, stacked with kids just trying to have fun. In fact, growing up in Slovenia, with a dad playing pro, Dončić reportedly joined the juniors at his father's club as an 8-year-old and immediately played with the under-12 team. He would have played with the under-14s, but league rules wouldn't allow it. By the age of 16, he was playing professionally in Spain. In 2018, at 19 years old, young for the pros, where college typically comes first, he joined the NBA's Dallas Mavericks. There, against the best players in the world, Dončić has scored points almost at will, accumulating more than any other player in the league in 2023-24, on his way to the NBA Finals that same season. Yet his lack of defensive statistics tell a very different story and reveal a much less likable attitude. One of the reasons I love basketball, and inversely don't like American football, is that I like sports that switch from offense to defense and back again fluidly, meaning that even if you're a great scorer like Dončić, you'll regularly be called upon to help your team stop your opponents from making shots too. Given that American football is essentially played by two different teams, offensive and defensive, which swap out completely when possession changes hands, it is largely devoid of the excitement of watching someone master both sides of the game. The skillful attacker making a game-saving defensive play, or defenders sneaking in meaningful points are for me some of team sport's most memorable and enriching moments. What basketball fan could forget the block by LeBron James in the 2016 NBA Finals? It is in these moments that we catch a glimpse of supreme athletes who routinely make elite performance look effortless, visibly trying, something we all know the feeling of and can relate to. For most of us, life is all trying and only sometimes succeeding. Sports are quite literally games, but it is hard to escape their constant mirroring of real life, particularly when you have a child playing. Real life is not all offense, nor is it all defense. It consists of wins and losses too, tricky opponents, good teammates and wanting ones. Last year, when my son was going through a particularly bad losing streak in basketball and baseball, with me sitting in the stands for almost every painstaking minute, I developed a useful kind of mantra for sporting parents. Losing is just as important as winning, I would say to myself, whenever I felt hopelessly sad for him or was tempted to inject myself into the competition in some way. I want him to succeed, but deep down I know that he needs to learn about failure too, that it will not only make him a better athlete, but a much better person. Still, that guy in basketball tends to be a scorer, and as such can rack up offensive statistics and rest on their laurels when the grunt work starts down the other end, leaving their teammates in the lurch. This is something Dončić has become infamous for, as well as leaning on skill over physical fitness and complaining loudly when calls don't go his way. In Game 3 of the 2024 NBA Finals, already down 2-0 to the Boston Celtics, Dončić's defensive laziness and boyish temperament were widely credited with costing the Mavericks the best-of-7 series. Crudely using his whole body to block an attacking Celtics player in the last quarter, Dončić was rightly called for his 6th foul, past an individual player's limit of 5 per game, triggering automatic ejection. Seated on the court, he slammed his hands against the wooden floor in frustration and screamed profanely at his bench staff to have the referees run a review of the call. His messy attempt to become an instant defender had failed on the biggest stage. Too little, too late. The Mavericks went on to lose the series 4-1. After the ejection game, ESPN journalist Brian Windhorst, in a scathing and almost breathless summation of the Stars' collapse, described Dončić as a hole in the Mavericks' defense. If you tend to think of defenders forming a wall for their opposition to try to penetrate, this was not a kind characterization, especially of a bona fide star in a league prone to coddling its best players. The prayer in Lakers fans' hearts this week is that Dončić's shock dismissal from Dallas will spark some self-reflection. At the news conference to introduce him to the town, Dončić sat beside Lakers general manager Rob Pelinka. Pelinka is an ex-agent, and even in his middle years still looks desperately the part of an old-fashioned Hollywood wheeler and dealer. Dressed in a black leather jacket 2 sizes too small, laden with far more zippers than style, he gazed out into the media throng like a man simultaneously very happy with his work and on the brink of awkwardly producing a switchblade on them, only to open it the wrong way. Beside him was the suddenly much younger-looking Dončić, dressed as a kind of boyish opposite number to Britney Spears' early schoolgirl chic character. Pressed ash-coloured slacks and a grey wool crewneck sweater, allowing just a peek of the starched white button-down shirt collar riding up his stubbly neck. He hunched forward on his stool as if expecting a scolding from the headmaster and spoke into a Lakers-branded microphone in gentle, tentative tones, sheepishly reassuring fans that he meant business in this town, that it would be different this time, for real. Though I could barely take my eyes off the hilarity that is Pelinka, as far as modern media management strategies go, and sport has never been more glazed over by them, it was a polished performance. But the performance I keep thinking about was last year's, ending with Dončić's infuriated butt planted on a basketball court, his doughy, sweaty body twisted with disappointment, his gaping mouth screaming at his coaches and teammates, as if it were all their fault that he never bothered to learn defence. Standing outside the rec centre on Saturday, Just hours before Doncic's arrival in our town became public knowledge, my son was basking in the glow of his rec team's win and his good game. He was back in black Crocs sandals, festooned in Kobe Bryant gibbets, as he only wears his basketball sneakers on the court. The contest over, he now focused on the after-game snack, while his little sister looked at her nab any leftovers. Parents congratulated him, and even the opposition coach told him that he loves to watch him play. One mother suggested to my wife she get some video online soon for college coaches to see, to which she nodded politely. "Already?" my son later asked, incredulously. None of us are anywhere near taking this sort of talk seriously, not least my son. Yet such is the power of being that guy, even if only for 2 games in a community rec league at 10 years old. Sport weaves powerful fantasies, not just for those who play it, and it starts when you're very young. For the lucky few, bodies hold and dreams come true, sometimes rolling all the way into a staggeringly profitable career playing your favourite childhood game. Our son has a long way to go and a hell of a lot of growing up to do still. Thankfully, he knows it. I know that I, and half the town, are hoping the Lakers' latest big-name recruit, Luka Dončić, might finally show him the way. Fire and Rain, from February 13th, 2025. The rain is falling hard in Los Angeles this week. Grey days, closed in, permanently wet, stupid drivers, the sound of sirens, a mild panic. Pounding storms have taken the place of more regular rainfall. It's not unlike what we just went through with the wildfires. Nature takes hold and the normal predictability of a city disappears. Order is revealed to be a myth once again. Given how quickly we've been beset by both wildfire and heavy rain, the James Taylor song Fire and Rain keeps coming to mind, unprompted, aided by the line, "I've seen sunny days I thought would never end," an LA echo that even Randy Newman might be envious of. I'm about as into Taylor as any other slight sentimentalist who likes guitar. I don't own one of his records, but you don't really need to, do you? Any more than one needs to own the elements themselves. His unique brand of bittersweet folk rock, as Buzz Aldrin described it in The Simpsons, is just out there in the atmosphere, like Homer. In that way, we can take it for granted, so I went back and took a listen to Fire and Rain this week. The lyrics came off a bit corny, which wasn't a shock, but the very 1970 production and splashy drum sound doesn't help. The song is sad but uplifting, which may be its secret. Fire and Rain worked, obviously, or it wouldn't still be in my head. So I read a little bit about its creation too. It did come very, very fast, Taylor told NPR in 2000, but it was a great relief. There was things that I needed to get rid of, or at least get out of me, or get in front of me, or at least have some other relationship than feeling them internally. He's referring to the song's 3 verses, each directly related to 3 personal traumas: the loss of a friend, drug addiction, and his time in a mental hospital, tied together by the simple idea of weathering harsh, contradictory elements, fire and rain. Speaking of his most well-known song and its origins, Taylor went on to elaborate on the mysteries of songwriting in general. They come less frequently and perhaps I don't have the same urgency to get them out. I think a couple of things have changed. One is that I'm older and I'm not as emotionally intense. I've found other solutions, emotional solutions in my life. Another thing is that I'm more distracted. It's just very difficult for me. I think songs need to come out of a state of boredom almost as much as anything else. You need to have empty time in order to receive them. I'm much more distracted now, and there's less time for them to come through. Fire and rain have both come to feel like standard weather events in Los Angeles in recent years, far from the merely poetic and raw, impressionistic emotional picture Taylor was painting from his subconscious. We're learning to be bombarded by both, almost simultaneously. Now I feel that if by chance Taylor were to sing Fire and Rain at some kind of charity benefit in LA, it would seem rather on the nose. A thought sadder than anything a 6-string might possibly muster. Prayer for a New Fridge from February 20th, 2025. Online shopping for a refrigerator, and boy do they look good inside. Who packed these things? Now there's a job, I think to myself, and it occurs to me I have that job already in our fridge all the time. I could be doing it much better too. For starters, the colours aren't coordinated at all. Categories are all over the place. Meat next to dairy, sauces beside everything, half-open containers, poor wrapping. If we were a commercial kitchen, the county would have shut us down years ago. How do I introduce that casual stacking of Tupperwares I'm seeing online? Keep everything so fresh, so clean, wiped down, no secrets, no regrets, no shame. A couple of years ago, my son became interested in TikTok organising videos. We let him loose on the fridge a few times and it was fantastic. He stood in there, barely able to reach all the shelves, sorting it out brilliantly. Long after the warning beep for the door being open too long had given up, he was still sorting. I would do it more often, but like a lot of things online, the fridges share no relation to reality. Real fridges are like life, messy. Real fridges don't merely demonstrate their ample storage space, they rage against it in a series of conflicting, sometimes angry moods. Nor do they showcase perfectly balanced diets. They don't speak to a hopeful future either, but instead remind you of your checkered past. Our fridge, like yours I'm guessing, is a hodgepodge of a tale. The eternal hope of leftovers dies very hard and tests me daily. There's inevitably a salad bag barely holding on, always just too large for the group, never used again in time, dirty water pooling in the corners. Jars of forgotten origin camp like squatters on crowded shelves. Vegetables the kids rejected, but someone bought again anyway, laugh silently. Meats I should have thought to cook or freeze sooner, dare me to smell them. It's hard to look in there most days, but you have to. The freezer too. How could I forget the freezer? What a funny little graveyard our freezer is. Handy for ice cream and tater tots, but mostly like a rented storage unit for all the big food decisions we're not quite ready to make. Waiting in vain for the day when I'll have the guts to admit defeat or the patience to thaw something before cooking it. But this new fridge will be different. A fresh start, a new dawn, one where we invest in those large bottles of healthy-looking juice and convenient-sized yogurts. Stack the transparent drawers carefully with rainbows of fruit and vegetables. Date the leftovers. Keep the shelves clean and stocked only with containers of appropriate dimensions. Yes, buying something new online will once again solve all my earthly problems. Click. Sacred Space from February 27th, 2025. There are builders working on our garage right now. Every day at noon they set a little lunch table and chairs with buckets and play cards. I try not to disturb them then. No check-ins or questions. That's their time, I figure. A sacred space. In those moments, our home becomes their lunchroom, just between noon and 1, every day, like clockwork. I'm reminded of when I was much younger, just out of university, and had a work day more like that. At a packaging supply company in Melbourne, shortly before moving to the US. I was charged with unloading shipping containers, filled top to bottom, end to end, like a 3D Tetris game, with boxes of rubber bands and plastic bags and rolls of tape. They were being moved into a brand new warehouse, with slick concrete floors and towering storage shelves, all still smelling of fresh paint. My one and only co-worker was a middle-aged Asian man with very little English. I did most of the lifting and he drove the forklift. Often he had me ride on a full pallet going up, all the way to the top of the racks, where birds sometimes nested. I would pick up boxes from beneath my feet, one by one, and stack the shelves, until I was standing on a bare pallet, and he lowered me down again. Anything to save time. Safety be damned. There was no brass. It was just he and I. His goal was simple, to complete the work by lunchtime. He had commandeered the lunchroom and used it as his own private office. Every day he microwaved pungent meals brought from home and ate while listening to radio in a foreign language, putting his feet up on my chair, smoking, reading, for hours. We clocked in and out on an actual punch clock. He'd warned me not to leave early, or the bosses would give us more work to do. Maybe send 2 containers instead of 1. So I roamed around the largely empty warehouse, alone, killing time, thinking. I would ride the pallet truck like a scooter, skidding around corners, falling over now and then, drive the electric forklift up and down the aisles of new orange racks, sometimes crashing into things until the battery died, or read the paper if I thought to bring it. No smartphone, no nothing, until quitting time. My workmate and I never did talk much, let alone play cards, but I think about him and that job and digging ditches, building fences, washing dishes, working in a bar, all the time, especially when I see labourers on break, about that way of life, disconnected from the endless digital world, worried only with the physical task in front of you, clocking in and clocking out, offering up your body to industry, but holding on to your mind, a sacred space. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Little bits of music are by me as well. This song on the intro and outro is by my old band Horse Stories. It's from a record called November. You can check all that out on the streaming services. Thanks to everyone who's subscribe to this podcast and subscribe to the Substack, tbhemingway.substack.com. It helps a lot. I love to hear from you all as well. Appreciate the support. And like I said, we'll see how many stories I get through in March. Might need a break in March. It's my birthday in March. Come on, take some time. Take care of yourselves. It's crazy out there for many, many different reasons. I'm not going to get into it. See you later.